It's my great pleasure tonight to introduce Kathy Manning. Uh, Representative Manning is joining us tonight to talk about the importance of the 2022 midterms in North Carolina. She is the Congresswoman from the 6th District in North Carolina and is one of the leading progressive Jewish voices in our country today. Before she was elected to Congress, Representative Manning was the first woman to serve as chair of the Jewish Federations of North America, which of course is the umbrella organization for the Jewish Federation movement across the country. In Congress, Representative Manning is a strong advocate for affordable health care, prescription drug prices, quality education, economic opportunity and equal justice for all, and of course, a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. I'll also add that it's a particular pleasure for me to introduce Kathy because she and her husband, Randall Kaplan, were students of mine more years ago than any of us will admit at the University of Michigan Law School. So it's now my pleasure to turn this over to Haley Seufer, who is our very esteemed Chief Executive Officer at JDCA. Haley, over to you.
Great, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ronnie. Thanks to all the North Carolina chapter members for all the work that you all did in 2020 to help us ensure Democrats like Kathy Manning won, and a special thanks to the Congresswoman for joining us today. This will be a conversation and we're going to have time for questions. So if you have them, if they come to you as we're speaking, you can go ahead and post them in the chat and we'll get to as many as possible. But I'll start. Congresswoman Manning, you know, I distinctly remember your first few days because you had described them to JDCA, but obviously you arrived in Congress right amid an insurrection. Can you reflect for us a bit on your first term, some of the biggest challenges you faced, your biggest accomplishments, and your priorities for this year?
Happy to, and thank you for having me here today. I'm delighted to be here, and I also want to thank you, the leadership team, and also everybody on this call for what you're doing. We need to do everything we can to maintain the majority. We've done a lot of good things this first term, and I'll talk about I'll try to give highlights, but maintaining the majority is critically important, I believe, for the future of our democracy, and also for maintaining the good work that we've been doing, allowing us to continue to do good work and not give the Republicans the opportunity to undo so many of the good things we've done. So I just want to thank you all for what you have done and what you're going to do. Reflections on my first year, since we don't have 3 days, I'll try to just hit a few of the highlights. You mentioned, Haley, you mentioned the insurrection, and that really, you know, I was caught in the gallery. I was in the last group that was taken out to safety. I won't tell the long story. I'm happy to tell it again, but I don't want to derail this conversation. All I can say is, having been through that pretty both unexpected and frightening situation, my 4th day of Congress sort of set the stage for how I viewed things and derailed my plans for getting to know Republicans and figuring out who I could work with across the aisle. And because of the way the Republicans behaved after the insurrection and continuing to dispute the validity of the election, and in their attempts after the impeachment hearing to rewrite history, and we see it every day. It's gotten worse and worse, and that has really framed my experience in Congress. That, in addition to COVID, because my first 4 months in Congress, we were not allowed to be on the House floor together. We had almost no meetings in person. Almost everything was done by Zoom. And of course, when we were together, we had to have masks on. So my plan to get to know people and really have good in-depth conversations on big issues, that was derailed a little bit because it was so difficult to be with people in person. And as I said, it was difficult to know which Republicans you could work with. In terms of our accomplishments, passing the American Rescue Plan, I think, was a critical accomplishment. It allowed us to get, despite the fact that we will probably live with COVID for years to come, we are living with it. And had it not been for what the administration and what Congress did in getting all that money out there, getting shots in arms, getting a vaccination, not only buying the vaccine that we needed, which the prior administration hadn't done, but putting together a comprehensive plan for how we could get people vaccinated, we would not be where we are today had we not had the money from the American Rescue Plan and frankly, the brilliance of people in the administration for putting that vaccination plan together so that and stop people dying from COVID. The other thing, we also, with the American Rescue Plan, were able to keep people fed, keep people from being thrown out of their homes, eventually allowed kids to get back to school safely, and we kept businesses from failing. And just today I read we now have the smallest number of people on unemployment in, I think, probably since the Great Depression. And everybody is very concerned right now about inflation, and we're concerned about inflation. Everybody's concerned about gas prices, but we have to step back and see what we have accomplished. We've created more jobs during this administration than in our history. So we've done an enormous amount. We passed the infrastructure bill, which was also enormous, and we reinstated community projects, which were formerly known as earmarks, but we're calling them community projects because that is what they are. It's not the back room, everybody gets something that they need personally. These are projects we have to submit. We have to sign a no conflict form for every single project, and they are supposed to be projects that really benefit your community. I was able to bring home, I think, $16.4 million for projects all across my community. They are extraordinary projects that are going to make a big difference across my district. In terms of personal accomplishments, in addition to everything I've just said, I have been able to take a lead on some really critical issues in the healthcare area, also with regard to anti-Semitism and Israel. And education, kind of a mix there. And I'm happy to ask more questions about it, but I'll take a pause because I think I probably addressed the issues you asked me about, Haley.
You have, but it wasn't, you're right, it wasn't totally fair because we could have stuck with that first question for the whole hour. But it does lead me to a second question, which is, what do you think that we can be doing to ensure that people in your district, that Americans understand these accomplishments? I mean, this is the real challenge that we face in advance of the midterms. You're right, because of inflation, and we see this even in polling of Jewish voters, that the approval ratings it's been a difficult few months here. And there's not a great appreciation. We have it, but there's not a great appreciation for the accomplishments that have been made in the past 2 years, or at least since Biden has been in office. What can we do?
I think there are a couple things we can do. Number one, I was the beneficiary of the president's decision that he was going to go out on the road and meet with people in different districts and talk about our accomplishments. He came to Greensboro last Thursday, I think it was, and I was privileged to be one of the 4 people who got to meet him on the tarmac. And it is quite a big deal when Air Force One lands and you see the majesty and grandeur of that one man walking down this huge staircase from this massive plane, and then you see out of the back doorway 50 people running out because he's got his advance team and his Secret Service and the press, and then we went to North Carolina A&T, which is the largest historically Black university in the country. It graduates more Black engineers than anywhere in the country, and the governor, the administrator of the EPA, Michael Regan, who's from North Carolina and an A&T grad, and the 3 of us got to go with the president as he toured the new engineering and innovation building and met with students and professors to learn about the work they're doing on cybersecurity and robotics, and how the dollars that we're getting out through the American Rescue Plan and the infrastructure bill, and also my community projects, how those are supporting the university and building our future workforce. So we got a lot of press, a lot of attention, and we were able to talk about what we have accomplished. That's on the big grand scale level. I think on the personal level, we have to have conversations with people about, individuals, what we've accomplished. I always start my presentations by reminding them where we were a year and 3 months ago, because we all forget we didn't leave our homes. We brought our groceries and we washed the packages. I mean, people forget what we were living through back then. And so I think we have to remind people where we were, how far we've come, and the things that we will continue to do if we're in office. I also think this group can write letters to the editor, because there are a lot of crazy people who write letters to the editor all the time. We need to be writing letters to the editor on the things the values that we think are important, and try to introduce some sanity into those letters. And we ought to be writing op-eds and articles. In Greensboro, unfortunately, that's no longer possible. But if you live in a city that actually takes op-eds from people, write those articles, because that's how we get information across.
Great. Well, thank you. All good ideas, which we will be doing. And more. We're going to be talking directly to voters we're also going to soon have a week of action coming to see you and everyone else on the Hill, but also speaking directly to voters as we get closer to the election. You mentioned your work as it relates to the U.S.-Israel relationship. Can you speak more about that? Obviously, we know that you share our commitment to a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, but I also know that you've traveled in delegations to Israel. You've done a lot of work within the Democratic caucus as it relates to Israel. I'm just wondering if you could talk about it and also give your assessment of where things stand as it relates to Democrats and support of Israel.
I did not expect that I would be spending nearly as much time on anti-Semitism and the importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship as I'm spending. I did not expect, none of us expected the attack from Gaza last May. And in fact, that was probably the first moment in Congress when I thought, oh, I know exactly what to do on this issue. Up until that point, I'd only been in Congress for several months, but on this one, I thought, all right, I had heard that some of the far left Democrats were going to the House to House floor to do a special hour of pro-Palestinian speeches. So I happen to be on a chat chain with the strongest pro-Israel Jewish members. And when I heard that, I said, okay, activate the chat chain. We've got to go to the House floor and make the pro-Israel speeches and tell the other side of the story, which we did, I think, that night, the same night as the pro-Palestinian speeches. When I went to, I have signed on lots of letters. I have helped to write a lot of letters. When I went on my first congressional delegation to Israel in last July, I was able to we met with all the leaders of the Israeli government. We went with the Prime Minister Shtaya of the Palestinian Authority. We met with a whole host of people. We actually had a presentation by the ambassadors from Morocco, the UAE, and Bahrain in the King David Hotel, which was extraordinary that we never could have predicted that. But because of my deep knowledge of Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship, I was able to ask questions a lot of times of the Israeli leaders that I already knew the answer to, but I knew there were issues that the non-Jewish members knew nothing about. So I had the advantage of asking the minister of, I think it was of immigration, how is that Ethiopian resettlement going? Because I knew that the non-Jewish members knew nothing about the Ethiopian Jews living in Israel, and I wanted to give them the opportunity to tell us about it. I threw a lot of softballs because I wanted to make sure that the information was getting out there. I more recently went on a trip to Israel. My husband was on it, and I was on the Democratic bus, and when there were things that I thought are tour guide wasn't saying, I was not shy about saying, do you mind if I tell a story? And going to the front of the bus and elaborating on things. I also was able to have individual conversations with some of the members who were not familiar with Israel as we were touring from place to place. But one of the things that I want to emphasize that I thought was so a leap forward, and not only, you know, it's nice that we have the most proactive Jews who are working on Israel, but I have tried to expand that number, and I've been able to bring a few more, bring out the ability and willingness of other Jewish members to be more active, to call out anti-Semitism, to talk about the importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And most recently, when the Amnesty International report, not when the report came out, which we had a flurry of letters, but when Mr. O'Brien, the U.S. representative of Amnesty, made those pretty revealing statements to a Democratic women's group, where he basically said he knows the American Jewish people, and we don't believe in the need for a Jewish state. We figured a way to make a statement that all 25 Jewish Democrats were willing to sign on. And I think that's the first time all 25 Jewish members were able to agree on a statement. And we did it by working together, but then at the same time, we did a stronger letter from, I think, the 10 of us that wanted that stronger letter. So we learned that we could do a 1-2 punch and have a better reaction and a stronger force by working together, but keeping the more adamant pro-Israel members happy by doing that second letter. So that was sort of a creative approach that we took, and I think it worked extremely well.
Yes, getting all the Jewish members to agree on anything is no small feat. We had the opportunity to meet with you and others, the Jewish members, and there's a range of views, just like there's a range of views in any group of people. But kind of picking up on that theme, as Michael said in the introduction, you were the first female chair of the Jewish Federations of North America. You have played this role as a national Jewish organizational leader. What lessons did that experience teach you as it relates to your role in Congress? How have you applied those lessons?
So there were so many things I learned in 9 years in leadership at JFNA. I think probably the lesson that I took away that helps me the most in Congress, we Jews have different ideas on almost every issue. In fact, we like to joke that each Jew has 3 conflicting views on each issue. And we love to express our disagreements. But I learned at JFNA that if we were going to achieve really important things, particularly things involving standing up for Israel, standing against anti-Semitism, and helping people in need, we had to put aside our personal agendas and work together to accomplish those big goals. And I saw this in the work we did helping with the Aliyah, the absorption of the Soviet Jews and the Ethiopian Jews, and work we did when the Argentinian economy collapsed and when our own economy collapsed, and we had to figure out how to help American Jews who were in such difficult times. And every time we had a national disaster that we jumped into, we would disagree about how are we going to raise the money, how are we going to spend the money, but in the end, we agreed on what our goal would be, and we figured out how to work together. And I think that that's something that I bring with me to Congress. And that example I just gave about having the statement that everybody would sign on to, all 25 Jews, it was weaker than I would have wanted to sign on to, but we got that letter out, and then we did the stronger letter. That's sort of an example of figuring out how you work together, because we're always stronger if we work together. And working with people with whom you have a lot of disagreements. I serve on the Education Labor Committee, and I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And on the Foreign Affairs Committee, we generally we all agree on what our goals are. We just have different ideas about how we get there. But I have found a couple of Republicans on that committee who are reasonable and who I can team up with on resolutions or bills. And I think, you know, a lot of that came from my work at JFNA. And I also learned that the more you know about your topic, the more you are able to bring your personal experiences to bear on when you're arguing for your position, the better you are at persuading others to see the issue the way you want them to see it.
Great. Well, you know, we spoke briefly at the outset. Ronnie mentioned this, and she'll talk about it toward the end as well. What we're all going to be doing in this election to keep seats like yours blue, and hopefully flip that Senate seat as well. But if you could give us a sense of kind of the landscape as you see it in terms of your seat in North Carolina. I know you've had some redistricting litigation and issues, and we are now just shy of 7 months out from this election. We're ready to go. What can we all be doing to keep your seat and others like it blue?
So we have some real opportunities in North Carolina, and we have some challenges. Thanks to the North Carolina Supreme Court, we went from a map that would have only allowed for 3 Democrats to be elected out of the 14 in North Carolina to a map where, best case scenario, we could actually have 7 if all the cards fall our way. My district, which was a blue district, last time my challenge was in winning a very difficult primary. This time, my seat is much more difficult. And I learned today that the Republican, there's 7 running in the primary, but the one who I suspect is the one who will win could be a very difficult candidate to beat. He has a military background. He was in special forces in the Gulf War. He worked at the Pentagon for, I think, 20 years and went to the Harvard Kennedy School. And he has the ability to raise money, and he's already gotten some national endorsements. So that's a tough Republican to beat, particularly in today's environment. My district has been redrawn so that I have all of Guilford County. If we get all of our voters, I have just a little bit of Forsyth, a little bit of Winston. And then I have 2 ruby red districts, counties rather, Rockingham and Caswell. And we were talking before everybody came on. I went to Caswell today to meet with their elected officials in Yanceyville. And I think I might have met all the Democrats they have there, but that's all right. We're not going to give up on that county. We're going to go there and continue to visit with them and show up. And Rockingham County, I used to try cases there many, many years ago. That is also a very Republican county. So I've got to make sure that I can build the field team that I need, that I can go on TV, go on radio, get the mail out, and run a really tough campaign. The same is true, probably, there are a couple of other seats. G.K. Butterfield's seat has become more difficult. And I know in the Charlotte area, there's an opportunity for a pickup. There's another opportunity for a pickup outside of David Price's seat. Those are some real opportunities. But if we're going to do that, it's all about getting voters out. It's all about voter turnout and also getting our message out. And so it's going to mean a lot helping candidates, because you got to do a lot of door knocking and meeting with people. The campaigns are expensive. I've been put on the Republican target list. So there is some acknowledgement that my district is, it's still rated as either likely or leans Democrat. I can't remember how Sabato put it, but they see this as an opportunity to knock me out. So we've got to work really hard in this state to make sure we don't leave any voters out, and we get everybody to turn out and vote. The 3 races that I want to mention that are critical to North Carolina: Sherry Beasley, and you've mentioned that. I want to particularly emphasize that seat, not only because we pass so many great bills in the House, and they go to die in the Senate because we don't have enough Democratic senators. So Sherry Beasley is a critical pickup. In addition, if she runs against Ted Budd, and I suspect she will, I can tell you from personal experience that is not a man we want in representing us in the Senate. The other two seats that are critically important to the future of North Carolina, and therefore the future of the country, are the two open North Carolina Supreme Court justices. One is an open seat, and that's Lucy Inman is running for that seat, and she's a great candidate. The other is Jimmy Irvin is up for re-election. And it's only because we had a majority of Democrats on the North Carolina Supreme Court that we have a map that has the potential to be so good. So those, as we're working for our House candidates and our Senate candidate, we also have to remember those North Carolina Supreme Court justice seats.
Great. Well, we have our work cut out for us, but we're up for the task. We're getting ready to mobilize our voters. I see that Elaine has raised her hand. Elaine, if you don't mind putting your question in the chat, I'm happy to take the questions from the chat, and I will now turn to the chat. So Ellie, and I think it's Ellie, I hope it's not Eli, but I think it's Ellie, mentions the press, the media, and we were talking, I think, when she posed this question about the accomplishments not getting enough attention. And she agrees we must step up our targeted and easy to understand messaging. If there were 3 issues that you, I'm sure you're thinking about this already, that you will really focus on in your conversations with voters in advance of this election, what are the 3 issues?
I'm going to talk about healthcare, because I think one of the most important issues right now is, well, we've seen with the pandemic how critically important healthcare is. And we have passed a lot of good bills in the House to try to make healthcare more accessible and more affordable. And I've got a bill that would limit the out-of-pocket costs people have to pay for their prescription medications, and Senator Warnock introduced a companion bill in the Senate. And people struggle to afford their medication all across the state. We just passed a bill in the House to cap what people would have to pay for insulin to $35 a month. That would have a huge impact on people across the state. I've also got a couple of bills that I am a co-sponsor of to allow expanded Medicaid in this state, to do an end run around our state legislature to allow people to get the expanded Medicare, either by allowing cities or counties to do it, or by allowing individuals to apply directly to the federal government to take that expanded Medicaid, because we have too many people. We got 500,000 North Carolinians who don't have coverage right now. We also have to be, so I'm going to talk about healthcare. I'll also talk about reproductive rights when I'm in Guilford County, because let's see what happens when the Supreme Court gets this Mississippi case. It is probably going to be the end of Roe versus Wade as we know it. And we're going to have women faced with very, very difficult choices all across the country. So I will be talking about healthcare. I will be talking about economic opportunity for all. We can't just talk about the economy. We have to talk about how we can make sure that we're helping people get the education and the training they need for good paying jobs. Because there's so many people in this state who have not been able to take part in the growing economy because they haven't had the education or opportunity to get good paying jobs. I'll talk about inflation. Hope maybe by November that won't be as big of an issue, but I suspect it will be. So we'll talk about the things that we've tried to do to bring costs down, to fix the supply chains, to build more things in America. We can't control what's happening in Ukraine, but the president is doing an awful lot to try to, he has stabilized the price of gas here. And hopefully we can keep it not just stable, but perhaps bring the cost down.
Great. On a related note, Michael Horowitz, hello, Michael, has just posted a question. It is related. If he's wondering if there's any effort to create one democratic narrative that all members can drill into as it relates to the electorate. And we saw this successfully happen in 2018 as it relates to healthcare. There's no question that was the message. Everybody talked about it and it was successful. Or is it that every candidate should focus on the messages that resonate most, or at least they perceive to resonate most in their district?
I think what we're going to end up with is sort of a hybrid, because I think we are hard at work on coming up with the message so that people can understand what the Democratic Party represents. But once we create that message, and there's been a lot of discussion about it, a lot of work on it, once we create that message, I think people are going to tailor it to their districts. For those of us who are in North Carolina, with the exception of David Price's district, there are not as many progressives. And, you know, somebody once said to me that a Democrat in North Carolina would be a moderate Republican in New England. And there's a little bit of truth to that. So we will tailor, we will take out of the national Democratic message what works best in our district.
Great. And Elaine had a question about Medicaid expansion. And this is one of many issues where it's passed the House and stalled in the Senate. And is there any chance of getting the Senate to vote for Medicaid expansion? She's listed all of them: voting rights, reproductive rights, insulin coverage, before the November election. I will just say, this list goes on. Thanks to Democrats in the House, we've seen quite a few remarkable bills pass, including very important voting rights legislation to counter the state level Republican voter suppression and election subversion efforts, and just to go on and be stalled in the Senate. And on that issue and others, what can we do?
If I were to look at that list and say, what's the most likely bill to get through the Senate? And I don't have any inside knowledge because I don't have conversations with senators. But I would say that the one I'd put my bet on the most likely might be insulin coverage, because we all know who our two holdouts are. And my guess is that there are a lot of people in West Virginia who are on insulin. And that might be the one thing Joe Manchin would be willing to take a good vote on. And as for Sinema, I have no idea. I don't think anybody knows what her position is on anything. But reproductive rights, I don't think you're going to get Manchin, or I don't know about Sinema. I don't think you're going to get I don't think that'll get to the floor. I mean, to get it to the floor, you have to get rid of the filibuster, and I don't see that happening. Voting rights, I think Republicans believe that if everybody gets to vote, they lose. So I don't think we'll be able to get a vote on voting rights. Medicaid expansion, there are only 12 states that care about it. And I mean, there are only 12 states where we don't already have Medicaid expansion, and they're mostly southern states. I don't think we're going to, I wish I could say, yes, we will, Joe Manchin will come to his senses. I don't think we're going to get it. I think we've got to elect more Democratic senators.
I will say that as part of our week of action, and we did this last year, we did meet with Sinema, and we do have at least one. We have Deborah Stein on representing our Arizona chapter here. Maybe Deborah can help us figure out how to influence Kristen Sinema. We're going to try again. That's a tough one, which is why we need to expand the Senate majority. And we're trying. So Richard and Joyce Klein, and I don't know if this comes from Richard or Joyce, but I guess from both of them, have asked about Ukraine, and we haven't had a chance to talk about Ukraine yet. Really important issue that the Jewish community is deeply concerned about, the not only the people under bombardment in Ukraine, but also the refugees who have fled. If you could speak a bit, obviously you're on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I know that you've been watching this issue closely. If you could speak about the Biden administration's approach to Ukraine, what more we can be doing. I will say that there was a poll of Jewish voters that came out last week that showed that President Biden's approval ratings are highest as it relates to his approach to Ukraine. It was 72% supported. So anyway, with that, interested in your view about military aid.
Is that among just Jewish voters? Is that what you said?
It was just Jewish voters. It was a national poll, 800 Jewish voters. And it looked at approval ratings, and we asked, it was a bunch of issues, and Ukraine polled the highest. His approval rating was 72% on Ukraine.
So I think, let me start by saying, I think that the president has done a very remarkable job in much of what he's done in Ukraine. He managed to bring all the NATO allies and non-NATO allies together to stand shoulder to shoulder on so many of the issues, and he rebuilt what President Trump tried so hard to destroy, which is those close alliances. And the sanctions are stronger and more impactful than could have been done if we'd done them ourselves, stronger, I think, than Putin ever expected. And so I think in that respect, I think he's done a good job. He has gotten an enormous quantity of weapons sent very quickly to Ukraine. And I have to say, everything that was done all in terms of the military assistance, I do not recall a single briefing that I was in that predicted that there was any chance that Ukraine would not fall within the first 2 weeks. So all the intelligence that we were getting was Ukraine will not be able to hold off, and you know, we're going to have to stick with our NATO allies then to punish Putin with terrible sanctions. No one expected that we'd have this great hero in Zelensky who would inspire the Ukrainians, and that they would have this fierce fighting spirit and the ability to fight the way they've been fighting. And nobody predicted, of course, that the Russian military would be so terrible in what they're doing. I saw part of the question was, do I think President Biden will get the authorization to expand the allocations for military and humanitarian aid? Yes, we've already sent an enormous amount of humanitarian aid and military aid, 800 billion right before we left. And I'm on a chat chain with all of the Democratic members of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and we've had all kinds of letters going back and forth and requests going back and forth, and we are determined to do more to support Ukraine. The balance, you know, you hear a lot of people talk about a no-fly zone, about providing the Ukrainians with fighter jets, but the military advisors who have briefed us have said the most effective way to help the Ukrainians is to get them more of the weaponized drones that can go after the planes without putting Ukrainian planes or pilots at risk, and the ground to air missiles that can destroy the planes. So my understanding is that we're getting them what they need. Now, as things change with the intensification of the fighting in the East, there'll be more demands for more weapons, and I believe that the president will get that authorization to get more military assistance.
Great. Well, we will take our last minute with you to thank you. Thank you so much for your leadership, for representing our values in Congress. We're so proud to be supporters and to be preparing to work to ensure that you stay in Congress because we're so happy that you're there representing the values of Jewish Democrats each and every day.
Thank you for
So,
what you do.
thank you, Congresswoman.